Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty League podcast. My name is Robert Martin, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host CDLMetrics. How are you doing on this Wednesday night?
Doing good. Yeah, excited for week two of Major 2 qualifiers. Week one was interesting. We had a completely new meta. So we got to see Rio for the first time. Obviously, some changes to the weapons and hardpoint rotations on a lot of maps. So it looked a lot different, but I feel like a lot of the results were as expected for the most part. A lot of lopsided matches last week. I think this week will be a little more competitive and maybe a little more upsets, a few more upsets here and there. But yeah, excited to talk with you as always.
For sure. There has been some news since we've done this podcast last week. Obviously we had Major 2 Week 1. We've also had quite some other news since then. Hex and Scump, so that's Hector Rodriguez, the owner of Optic, and Scump, one of the most famous players in all of Call of Duty League history, they are suing Activision. So this one is actually interesting. So a lot of people have had their take on this already. I want to have a bit of my take on this as well. So I'll just say what it is first, and I'll say some of my takes on this. So there's a lot of things they're suing. This is a grab bag of lawsuits, if you will. They're suing for an unlawful 100% monopoly over the Call of Duty League. They're basically saying, among other things, that the Call of Duty League has a monopoly, that when they acquired MLG, they basically had a de facto monopoly, so therefore you can't have that. The U.S., again, for I know we have some international audience. U.S. really does not like monopolies. They really hate that. We'll touch on that in a second. But they're saying they didn't clear the appropriate legal hurdles when they acquired MLG back years ago, which set up the stage for the CDL. They're saying that they prohibited each individual teams to make individual deals, individual sponsorship deals. They limited the players from being able to make deals themselves. They restricted their ability to earn income outside of the CDL. They also state there's also a complaint in there that basically Hector was told he was quote unquote not the type of investor the CDL was looking for, and that they forced him to be backed by multi-billion dollars by billionaires to be able to finance a league spot. That one, it's alleged that it's racism in there, that they did not want someone like Hector. They wanted older white billionaires. That claim could be particularly damaging, as well as assorted other claims about the fact that the Activision made the deal with the YouTube deal over the fact that they are able to get a discount on Google Cloud services for their own other products. So this is interesting. I think there are multiple levels of this. There's actually a lot of very interesting parallels with, I know I personally follow this, obviously. If you're watching this on this channel, we obviously have a college football podcast, and I know a lot of people here probably also follow American college football. There is a lot of similarities between some of the court cases for the NCAA and some of these court cases. Not so much monopoly. So I'll touch on monopolies first. So a lot of people think, oh, this is fine. It's the same thing as MLB and the NFL, and they own the IP so they can have a monopoly. Not exactly, because not technically, the MLB, the NFL, and the NHL actually have faced antitrust lawsuits in the past, but they've been defeated because what happens is Congress granted those sports leagues an antitrust exemption. They're able to say, okay, we know you are the sole proprietor of football as a competitive sport, functionally, therefore it's fine. You can't face any antitrust lawsuits. That's literally an act that Congress passed to basically make it so that they can't face antitrust lawsuits like this. Congress did not do that for the Overwatch League or the Call of Duty League or CS:GO or League of Legends. Congress didn't do that. Congress stepped in decades ago and made exemptions for MLB and all that stuff, but they did not do that for Activision and these leagues, these esports leagues. So that's interesting as well. Additionally, the restrictions on what monies on what incomes come can earn when endorsement deals, that's particularly salient because that's very similar to the arguments for college football. That's right bumping up against NIL, which basically there's been a sound you cannot restrict people from earning additional income and basically profiting off of their name, image, and likeness. That's like literally the same thing. So they're going to be in deep trouble with that one. Scum's probably going to win that claim. Potential claims that they were racially biased against Hector Rodriguez, that one's not great either. That one could be potentially bad as well. Now, my take on it is this. I was thinking about this kind of lawsuit, and the more I think about it, if you think the league is going to continue and everything and that is fine, do you launch this lawsuit, right? I feel like this is, if you know this league is going to go away, if you know the CDL is shutting down, I feel like that's when you say, okay, let's go ahead and do this lawsuit, right? I feel like this is, okay, we know this is done, we know this league is shutting down, and therefore we're going to sue you now to get money back out of this, or to get some sort of lawsuit money back from this, or settlement or whatever, and then we all go our separate ways when this is done. And I feel like that's what they're doing here. Because if you're Activision and you want to shut down the CDL and they know it, then what's going to happen is they're going to say, okay, we want to shut down the CDL. They're not going to want to leave this random litigation hanging around. They're going to want to settle it and then just pay them. They'll settle out of court, pay them tens of millions of dollars and make it go away. They'll be like, fine, whatever, it's done. CDL is done. No more pending litigation. That's all over. They're not going to drag out this litigation fight for years. And I think, I suspect, again, I have no particular proof, this has probably been pending for a while. And the lawsuit itself even even mentions the fact that the CDL laid off a ton of its workforce right after Major 1. And you almost have to wonder, I think it's very clear that Scump and Hector have been working on this for a while. Hex have been working on this for a while. And I think that they saw, now here's the thing, maybe it's they saw that and they said, okay, we've got to put a move on this lawsuit, or they are like, okay, we know this is going to end anyway, so now this is the time now to launch this lawsuit. It's either that or them laying off all those employees accelerated this. I am somewhat surprised that the rest of the league is not in this lawsuit as well, not named as some sort of class action as well. I would not be surprised if that's coming. This might be, I almost wonder if there's some sort of handshake agreement where it's like, okay, you go first. You see what happens. You go first. Try to shake down the Call of Duty League for cash. Let's see how it goes, and then I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bunch of team owners sitting there with some lawyers with a drafted document, and they're just waiting to see. But again, if the entire CDL sues Activision, I'm fairly sure Activision just says, okay, the league's done. Like, if you're suing us, why are we going to let you guys compete, right? You almost have to wonder if, I do not think this is the end of this. I think this is just the beginning. I get that the argument of the 100% monopoly is a little bit difficult to prove. I'm not sure exactly what that's trying to prove per se. Usually the court will order some sort of remedy. Okay, the CDL called Activision has a 100% monopoly over the CDL. Okay, what do you want from that? Do you just want money? Do you want to say, I think the argument's going to be because Hex is associated with Optic, he can only profit through Call of Duty, and because they own 100% monopoly, he had to do business with them for that. Okay, but that's not okay, that we're going to disband the CDL, because that's just, we're going to pay you money from that. There's a lot of different pieces to this, and I think that this is just the beginning. This is the beginning, but I would say that if they know that this league is being shut down, I think this is when you launch this lawsuit, you say, okay, here's what we're doing. We're doing this now to get our money out of this now before this all crumbles. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, you make a lot of great points, and it's important that we talk on this at length because it is a pretty big deal. Like, when I saw the news break last week, I was shocked and also a little bummed because we had already recorded and then this bomb drops and we're not there for it. But yeah, what you had mentioned too, I hadn't even thought about before, which was, if you're Hector and you're Scump, now is a good time to do this in theory because you're worried that the league might just fold up operations at maybe the end of the year or next year or soon is your thinking. If you can get some of your money back that you invested a ton into before that happens, right now seems like a good time when everyone sees, oh, they're laying off employees and oh, the broadcast is struggling at times, and it just feels like this thing is going to change in a major way. So that's interesting. I also think it's interesting that it's just Hector and Scump, right? It's technically not like Optic Gaming as an organization suing. It's the two of them personally, right? Together, they teamed up. So that's big because it's not the organization and there aren't other organizations or individual players or content creators that are involved in this. That makes you think, okay, what do these two guys have that can bring down this league, which they signed a contract for? Obviously, like when they sign their contracts to join the league, in the fine print somewhere, there's got to be like specifications for all of this kind of stuff. And one thing that comes to mind for like why Scump would want to join in on this would maybe be like Twitch, watch parties or just being able to stream to Twitch, outside of his regular games that he would play for the league when he was in the league. But because of that YouTube agreement, it's like they were kind of down on players and coaches streaming on Twitch. If you're Scump, you go, like, I could have been streaming on Twitch for X amount of days, and on average I make this much per day, and all of that money added up are my damages. Or if you're Hex, I don't know. There's a million different ways you can slice this up, but I'm on the side of, I get why they're doing it, but I really don't think they're going to see a lot of success when all is said and done. I just think unless more teams come with them in this and file jointly somehow, I just think Activision's going to be like, it's our game. We can, at will, they could just shut down the league because it's their game. So that's the interesting thing about it. You mentioned the NFL and other sports leagues. There are affiliate sports leagues of American football. There's the XFL and the USFL who have now combined. There's the Canadian football leagues. There's other leagues that play football. They do it differently. But for this game, Call of Duty is made once a year by one company, essentially. So they are rolling out the league. If you don't like what the rules are, it's too bad, so sad. You should have mentioned that before you signed on the dotted line. I don't know. There's a lot of legal stuff to go through. I'm not a lawyer, so there's a lot that I don't know about, but just my initial gut reaction is good luck, Optic guys, because I don't see this ending super well, but if it helps at all, then good on you. If they can get any sort of settlement out of this, that's big. That might encourage other teams to join in on it, but yeah, for now, I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. It'll be a long process, but just a really interesting wrench to throw into things as we approach the halfway point on the season.
Mm-hmm. There's another interesting piece to this as well. So one of the reasons why there are so many lawsuits regarding college football or college sports in general, but mostly it's been college football, and why you can't put why there can't be any restrictions on what athletes can earn off their name, image, and likeness is because they're not technically listed as employees yet, and they don't technically have employee contracts, but they're basically being paid. Like, the whole point is that you cannot put restrictions on employees in some sort of organized sports league like this unless you collectively bargain with them. And you actually cannot collectively bargain with a group of people unless they have a union, which the CDL players do not have a players union. Now, there's been pushes for that, and this is again why when you see the NHL, the NFL, the MLB, they all have players unions. Now, there's obviously reasons for that, because obviously you don't want to necessarily have to sit down with every single one of football, 60 guys a team, right? That would be a real pain, getting them all to come in and sign. They'd all theoretically have some sort of stake on it. So a lot of people think, oh, it's just like a blanket thing so they don't have to negotiate with a couple thousand people. It's actually more complex than that, because when you collectively bargain, you are allowed to put restrictions on the employment like that. So you can say, oh, okay, you can make a restriction on like an NFL player saying, "Oh, okay, you can only sign sponsorship agreements with Nike. You can't sign with Adidas." Just to say, for example, right? Now, I don't think that's actually a thing. I don't think that matters. But they'd be like, "Oh, you can only do it. You can only sign sponsorship agreements with Coke, not Pepsi," right? That's the thing. But what Scump is alleging is he's saying, okay, they actually basically put that into our contracts, even though they can't actually legally do that. And he's basically saying they forced us to sign, if not, we weren't going to be able to play. So I actually think Scump has a very strong case on that. I think Scump's going to get money. Hex, I don't know if he's going to get the Monopoly one. That one is trickier, but if he's alleging that they basically said you can't buy a CDL spot because you weren't a multi-billionaire, that's going to be a problem too. So I think there are, like, the thing is, if this was one thing, if this was just, oh, the CDL has a monopoly, therefore we're suing them, yeah, they're in trouble. But now when you read through each and every single one of these claims, you're starting to get to the point where, okay, yeah, that's illegal. They can't do that. I think some of the big things people point out is, oh, the monopoly thing. That might actually be legal because they do own the IP. They don't have the antitrust exemption, but maybe they could argue out of that. Okay, that one might be hard to argue. Okay. And I think people are going to say, oh, the fact that they negotiated the YouTube deal exclusively just so they could get a discount on the Google Cloud rights. Okay, that actually is also fine too. They can legally do that as well. I think people are focusing on those claims, and those are actually fine. But when you dig down into these deeper claims, the fact that they restricted employees from being able to profit off of endorsement deals from other companies, right? They talk about the fact that Scump was doing a Raid Shadow Legends stream, and they fined him money for that, or multiple other things. Those, they can really hammer them on that, and I think they are going to get some money. I don't think they may not win every single claim, but I think they're definitely going to get some money. So I think the things people want them to lose on, Activision might win on, but I think they're going to lose on. There's just so many things in this lawsuit that I think Activision is going to lose a couple of them. I doubt this actually goes to trial. I suspect this is just going to be settled. I suspect if if Activision folds CDL, they're just going to give them some money, make them go away is what they're going to want to do. Because people say, oh, Activision has, like, the Tactical Rab said they have the Avengers of lawyers. And you know what? That's correct. That's true. But you forget that Activision's a big company. They've got a lot of lawsuits they're dealing with at any given time. Remember back a couple of years ago, there was the sexual harassment stuff? That still exists out there, guys. That still exists. There's still a ton of regulatory things they have to deal with at any given moment. They're going to have to. The UK wanted something specifically about cloud gaming at a certain point. So there's constant legal things. It's not like these guys were like, they worked on the merger and then all of a sudden they're like, all right, going on vacation. Actually, to be fair, they probably did go on vacation immediately after that, but that's not the point. The point, they're not just sitting around doing nothing. They still actually have some things that they're doing. They're not just being like, all right, cool, it's time to go after. They have some things to do. It's not. I think they have some points here, but when you compare some of these to the lawsuits against college football, there's a lot of similarities, especially with Scump's case. I think Activision could be in a little bit of trouble with these ones, but this is not what's going to bring down the CDL. This is just for cash. So, it's also funny because at first I thought they're like, okay, there's no way they're going to let Scump and Hex stream. But then I realized that if they took away their streaming rights, it would literally prove that they have a monopoly. So, like, they just left them stream, like, which is hilarious because it's like, on one hand, they can make an argument. It's okay, we're not going to let people who are suing us stream our product, but at the same time, then you're proving you have a monopoly. Then, right? It's really funny. Activision is in this precarious position where they could just do nothing. They just have to sit here and let them. It's actually funny. I thought that was really funny, but yeah. So, anything else to add to this?
No, just that no matter the outcome, I think there is a lot of good that can come from this in terms of, if you're right, if Scump wins a claim here and a claim there and Hex gets a small W over, they're not going to win the whole case probably, but if they can pick out some key things, I think that will help moving forward with the COD League or whatever comes after it. Like, there will be more of a discussion, hopefully, between players and the owners and whoever's running the thing to really figure this out so this doesn't happen again and so everyone is relatively happy. We'll see how it plays out. It's going to take a while, but yeah, great points, Robert.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we're talking about EU champs. So again, obviously Toronto Ultra is the EU team. What do you mean? Still, COD League is here and stronger than ever from Boston to Miami. Who's this guy?
This is the
Y-
CEO or president of Toronto Ultra, whatever their parent company is. So, he is pretty outspoken. He is on X quite a bit. I just thought this was a weird tweet in a couple different ways. So, yeah, he says, from Boston to Miami to Carolina to Toronto, the road to the championship goes through the heartland of North America. EU2 soon. So he seems to hint at like a couple things. Let's go. First thing is he mentions EU, and EU is not on the schedule at all this year. The only thing that is not determined is where champs will be. So maybe it's EU. Maybe Adam is dropping some like really big hints as to where champs might be. I know his organization has done a lot to try to push for more teams in Madrid and in Europe and try to create this global brand that can compete with any other esports organization. I'm sure he is on the forefront trying to get EU an event, and champs would be a big one considering they haven't hosted anything since January of 2020 or February of 2020, whatever it was. So yeah, that would be big. It just was a weird hint that he gave at the end of that. But the part that I find odd is like he seems very passive aggressive in saying COD League is here and stronger than ever. Like for an owner to say that right now, like when the COD League just got sued, and keep in mind he said this after the lawsuit news dropped. Right, for him to say COD League is here and stronger than ever. Is it really? It seems like it's not. It seems like it's dying and fading and people don't want it to exist. So for an owner to go out of his way to just mention that, I don't know. It caught me in a weird way. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it, but I just thought, maybe an EU champs, or maybe he's just referring to getting an event in next year sometime. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this, Robert?
I don't know. I think it's because Jacob Hill makes a good point that it just feels like this is ending. There is this feeling of this is it. And he's Ultra still doing it, and Adam is saying, oh, still. I don't know. I honestly don't know exactly what the plan is. I think there's a non-zero chance Activision just says, okay, we're done, right? I don't know exactly, but I will say that I think on his part, he's like, I think for the and it's interesting too because Toronto and the Toronto Ultra and the Toronto Overwatch team are owned by the same conglomerate, and it's funny because the Toronto Defiant was one of the ones to actually begin the process to dissolve the Overwatch League too. But it's funny that they're like, I feel like Toronto Ultra is saying this still exists. This is still going to happen. We're not pretending this is dying. And I don't know. It's one of these things where it's you almost wonder if they have to say, hey, guess what? The league is not ending anytime soon. It's a brave face, right? No one said the Overwatch League was ending until it was ending. You almost have to wonder about this, and I think it's more along the lines of we just want we want to pretend it's not going away because it could. There's no necessarily. Just because the Overwatch League went away doesn't necessarily mean the COD League is next. So I think they have to pretend that COD is still happening, and then if it doesn't, then okay, we'll figure it out after. But we can't just say, okay, COD League is ending, guys. If Ultra stopped doing all this stuff, I think that'd be the dead giveaway that they know it's over, right? So they have to pretend it's still going on and all this stuff. I don't necessarily read a lot into it. I think this is their public face saying we have to do this anyway, so it's fine. Okay, this is, I believe, the only roster update for this week, I believe. Real joined Heretics as a substitute. Not a huge change there. He was on Ravens. He is not anymore. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
He's a
just
substitute now,
thought
and
it
we'll
was
see.
funny. I just thought it was funny that of all the teams he could go to, because he looked okay to start the year on Ravens. They obviously weren't great, but it just makes complete sense. Oh, there's this one Spanish player who's on another team, and then he had visa issues, so then Ravens switched their lineup. So it's very fitting that he ends up on Heretics with 5 other Spanish players. He will still be a substitute for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he joins the starting lineup. Yeah, good on Heretics.
Yeah, so last week we had a lot of Rio. which is good. I was excited to see the map, and we definitely saw a lot of it. I like it. It's definitely a better replacement for. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so yeah, we saw it quite a bit, mostly in Hardpoint, only one search and destroy game. There was another series, I think, that didn't go to game 5, but if it had, it would have been a Rio search and destroy. But yeah, we got it a lot. I included the scores from all the games in this slide just to show that it feels like it's going to be a pretty balanced map. We had one really close game, a handful of comfortable wins, and then a blowout to end the week. I think all that being said, it's a good map. It's fun to watch. I've played it a bunch in ranked play. It plays well. It's fast paced. The rotations are good. So yeah, I expect that to continue. Anytime we have a new map that gets added, usually the teams will play that quite a bit just because no one is really sure that they should veto it yet. So we see it quite a bit. Miami did not pick up any wins, but they played Toronto and Atlanta, so that's not a huge surprise. But yeah, I'm excited to see if we get as much going into this week, and I think we will.
Hmm. Extra time to prepare. Also, we did this analysis. Okay.
Yeah, I just thought so. This is something I talk about. We both talk about it every week, but it's something I bring up quite often when we're going through match by match. A lot of times we'll see, oh, this team was the last team to play on Friday, and they're the first team to play on Saturday. That seems like it's a tough spot to be in because, right, in theory, that team has not a lot of time to prepare unless they've been preparing for both teams throughout the week equally. I tend to think that teams will prepare for who is in front of them, and then they will prepare for the next team after that. But yeah, I went in and did some research, and this is just for this year. So the criteria are if it's a Saturday match and Team A played Friday and Team B has not played yet. If it's a Sunday match, Team A played Friday and Team B played Saturday. Obviously, Team B is in a tough spot there, having to play back-to-back days. Team A has a 1 day off. Or if it's a Sunday match where Team A played either day and Team B has not played yet, right? So it's Team B's first match of the week and Team A's second. So I went through each series and did the analysis based on the odds that we had when we recorded our podcast here, just to see. Obviously, the odds shift as you get closer to game time and as the weekend progresses, but just based off of the odds that we had listed at the time, it seems like the team that has extra time to prepare performs better, which is good to know. It's a small sample size, obviously. We have 23 matches this year where this has happened. But yeah, if you just took the team against the spread, so against the map spread, if it's -1.5, +1.5, whatever it is, if you just took the team that had extra time to prepare, you would be up 1.2 units on all 23 of those matches. If you took the money line, that's worse off. Obviously, that's a lot more volatile. It just takes one underdog basically to get you back to even money on that. So yeah, that's a little fluky, but if you compare that to what you would have if you took the team with less days to prepare, you're doing a lot better, right? Against the spread with extra time, plus 1.2 units. Against the spread with less time, minus 5.1 units. So that's a big delta right there. And then if you compare the money lines, if you just bet the money lines, less of a delta, but still better to be the team that has extra time to prepare. Just something to keep in mind. I just clipped a screenshot from this weekend's schedule. There are 4 matches this weekend where this criteria fits. The one that I have listed there is the first of those. We'll get to the matches in a second, but Vegas have the last match on Friday, and then they turn around and play Toronto in the first match on Saturday. Just something to keep in mind. Vegas probably will underperform in that Toronto match. We'll see. Obviously, that might not happen. They might shock the world and win, but just keep that in mind that Toronto is in a superior position, and they're the better team. Just want to leave it at that, but I'll continue tracking this as the year goes on to see how it shakes out. I'll just quickly list the other matches we have this week. So Vegas-Toronto is that first one. Toronto has the advantage. LAG versus Optic. LAG actually has the rest advantage. Miami versus LA Thieves has extra time. And phase versus subliners, phase has extra time. We'll get to those in just a sec, but just keep those in mind.
Okay, Major 2 qualifiers, wins, expected wins, pre-week 2. So again, Toronto is favored to not go undefeated quite yet. We'll get close to the full 7-0. Phase a little bit less, partly because I think they're expected to play each other, right? So that's partly one of the reasons why. That game is probably going to determine the number 1 seed in the pool, and then again, just a kind of lot of like little pieces. I will say Texas is up here though. Texas has improved since last week on this, I believe. Good for Texas, and I think New York too. Again, we're starting to see that. I think New York was a lot lower, right? Before they're now,
Yeah,
and it was
yeah.
weird that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. So, yeah, you're right. New York was the biggest mover from last week. I believe they were 7th in projected wins going into week 1. Now they're up at 4th. They had two matches where they were favored, but they weren't necessarily guaranteed to win those, and they did win both. So that was a huge boost. They still have actually two pretty tough matches. They play FaZe, they play Optic, but just the fact that they have 2 wins in the bank already is enormous. Not a lot of movement otherwise, like Toronto, Atlanta, Optic, all were 1, 2, 3, so they all stay where they were. Vegas is a mover. They got a win over LAG in what a lot of people viewed as a toss-up series. One thing to note for like the losers bracket, winners bracket thing, Minnesota and Seattle have flipped sides of that cutoff line. Despite Rocker losing, they actually have a higher expected wins number just because they looked really good against a Toronto team that I really didn't expect that they would beat. They didn't beat them, but their outlook moving forward looks a lot better because they performed well against the best team in the game. Still some tough competition for them. They get Optic this week, they get FaZe the week after, but the rest of them are pretty winnable. And I'd say the biggest loser from last week would maybe be Surge, right? They're now looking at the 9 seed, according to my numbers. They had a somewhat winnable game against New York and got swept pretty handily. They have some tough opponents still on the horizon, including Minnesota. So that Minnesota-Seattle game in early March is a big deal probably for winners bracket, losers bracket. So we'll see how that shakes out in a couple weeks. But yeah, for the most part, not a ton of movement just because a lot of the matches went the way we thought they would go.
Yeah, it is interesting, especially New York. It's weird. I like Carolina against them. Bet Carolina against them. Carolina could have won that game. They could have 3-0'd them, and they didn't. And then immediately after that, my model just loved New York, and I don't know why. And then, sure enough, they then turned around and 3-0'd Seattle. It's such a weird like a weird week for New York. They went 2-0, but my model really likes them now. My model really likes them even against FaZe. So I'm curious as to what they do. That's going to be a very interesting game when we talk about that in a little bit. Beating the market. Last week, not great for us. But yet again, though, our number 3 picks are doing really well. I don't know why. This sucks. Again, it's weird. My model loved this, and then after it, then the model hated this, and I'm like, that's weird. It shouldn't hate that. Like, they almost lost to Carolina, but sure enough, they lost that. And then apparently Vegas is good. You, same kind of thing, fading subliners, and they had a bad first game, but then a good second game, and then although Miami did take them to a game 3, I got around 5 in the control, they did not pull out the upset in map 3. They did get 3-0. A lot of these it's always close. Like, we're never like that far off, but it's just not this week, not for us. No. Yeah. Combined model plays did a little better. It had a very kind of rough Saturday here. We had some pretty good stuff there. Toronto, subliners, not great there. Saturday was rough, obviously Carolina, but then Sunday was good. Went 3 or 4 on Sunday, so that's pretty good. Again, the Seattle is weird. I don't know why it wasn't that my model suddenly liked New York after that, but it did, and that just burned all the Seattle bets, so that kind of sucked. Yeah. Match previews. First match of the week, Subliners versus Breach. Subliners minus 188 on the money line, minus 1.5 plus 150. Map 1, 10.5 point favorites. Map 2, 1.5 round favorites. Map 3, they are technically an underdog, but it's shaded to go the distance to 5 rounds. My model, I really like subliners. You slightly under like subliners a little bit. Not a lot, though, but you also don't love Boston either. except you Boston map 3, but I like the subliners map 2 and 3. So we're a little bit at odds here. I like the subliners. I think they're a team that's turned it around and they are doing a lot better than they were before. What's your thoughts on it? Are you taking Boston here, or are you going to just stay away from this game?
Yeah, it's a stay away for me. My numbers just line up with the market really well on this one. So yeah, there's one edge to be had according to my numbers, and that would be Boston in map 3, which it has hit on a lot in the last several weeks. It's one of my few decent picks that I give out. But yeah, it's still interesting with Boston because they only played once last week against Carolina. They did win 3-1. Looked pretty good with Asim in the lineup. They did still win the control, which is good for their outlook. But yeah, New York had a really good week. Competition wasn't that great, but they took care of business really well, only dropped one map out of 7. Yeah, I do think New York are a slight favorite in this. That's what market has. But yeah, to me, it's just, there's no value anywhere to be had. So it's a pass for me. I'm hoping Boston make it interesting just to throw a wrench into things because that's always fun. But yeah, for me, this one is mostly a pass. But I totally get your New York love. They really have only had one bad weekend this year, and that was Major 1. Outside of that, they've looked really good against a Boston team. I think they definitely could win, and could win by margin if everything goes right. Totally okay if you want to go New York, but I would, yeah, maybe lean just Boston, take control, but otherwise I feel pretty good about New York.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Map 2, Minnesota versus Texas. Texas had a very good week, even though they played one game, which was surprisingly the last game. Optic minus 225 on the money line, minus 1.5 plus 100, 20.5 point favorites, map 1, 1.5 round favorites, map 2, but that is plus money. And then 1.5 round favorites, map 3, but that is also plus money. Moving on to the model plays. We both like Texas money line. We both like Texas minus 1.5 a bit. We both have that over 50%, whereas the betting market has that at exactly 50%. But you like the map 1. I like the map 2 a lot, and we are ambivalent to them on map 3. Again, it's weird because we're both in a position where we both like Texas to win map 1, but the book has it at, what is that, 65-ish, give or take? 60 something ish, and we have it within 5%, so we can't really do much, right? It's a weird kind of, there's not much we can do, right? Okay, we both like them to win the map, but we can't really bet it, really, right? Like it's not really a betting line for us though. But do you expect optics to continue to cruise? Like the concerning thing I think for people is going to be that Minnesota took Toronto to a map 5, and then they got promptly destroyed. But where are you on this? Do you like Minnesota? Do you think Minnesota could have a chance? Like, why do you think how do you diagnose that problem? Do you think it was just a fluke that they got Toronto to the map 5, or do you think there is a good team there and they just got a bit unlucky there with Ultra, or they got a bit Ultra got a bit unlucky with them on Sunday?
Yeah, it's another result where Rocker went up against a top team and lost, but by far their best losing series of the year, I would say. And I saw some tweets going out afterwards or even during the match that were like, oh yeah, Rocker is definitely top 4. And after 4 maps, it sure looked like that. Like Rocker were in that until, yeah, round 1 in game 5 did not go their way, to say the least. And then it just snowballed from there. But yeah, Rocker were pretty darn close to just ending the series earlier than that. I think they look good. I don't want to say it's fluky because they look good at Major 1, right? They got a top 4 finish. But again, as I mentioned last week, like, I think people might overrate that finish because at the end of the day, Rocker were 2-2 in their matches that they played with a 7-8 map count. Like, it is what it is. I just think, yeah, the narrative in this Minnesota versus Texas game is Rocker can compete with anybody. Look at what they did last week. Look at what they did at the Major. And I think people are just overlooking Optic beat Rocker at the Major, and they got 3rd place. And Optic had a really good week last week that no one seems to be talking about because their competition was easy. But they played LA Thieves. That was their only game, but they swept them. They dominated that series. They did exactly what you need to do if you are a big favorite. And I just think a lot of times people overlook that. People go, oh yeah, Optic, we're always going to beat LA Thieves. They're the worst team in the league, and Optic is one of the best. They push that aside, but they put Rocker up on a pedestal of, look at what they're doing right now. They are good. And they very well could be a top 4 team. I'm not going to dismiss that. I hope that they are. But I think that whole narrative has pushed the market too far in Rocker's favor. So just with that being said, yeah, I like Optic slightly in map 1, slightly in map 3, but rather than take either of those, I just like Optic to win 3-1 or 3-0. So you get an even money on that. That is what I'll take in this series. I could be wrong. I could be dead wrong. Minnesota could come out and do exactly what they did to Toronto and keep it close and maybe even win, but I just think the entire body of work that Optic has is worth something, and to me that means they'll take this series.
Yeah, agree. Friday, match 3. Miami versus Legion. Miami minus 130 on the money line, minus 1.5 plus 162. Randomly, Vegas is the favorite. Not randomly, but you'd expect Heretics to be the favorite. Vegas is the favorite in the map 1 spread, minus 8.5. Heretics 1.5 round favorites for map 2, and then 1.5 round favorites for map 3. This one, again, the models are at odds here. You like Miami a bit. I like Vegas a lot. No real consensus here. Yeah, I think my model liked LAG, and then I think because Vegas beat LAG, then it really likes Vegas now, and I think it's weird because Miami they got 3-0'd by Toronto, and then they got 3-1 by FaZe, but they were relatively close there. But my model seems to not like that at all. They're just like, no, it was fluky that it was even remotely close. My model likes Vegas, and they did look pretty good against. They looked good against LAG. It's like a different LAG team, a different Vegas team after they dropped Standy. What are your thoughts on this? Are you higher on Vegas? Do you think they're a different team, or do you think this is still the same team? LAG just may not be that good.
Yeah, I think my model was just 1 week ahead on Vegas. If we backtrack a week, I had Vegas as a slight favorite in that series. The market said LAG were a slight favorite. If you looked at the desk picks, all 3 picked LAG. The fans picked LAG. I don't know what was going on with all the LAG hype. It might just be that they had a good placement at Major 1, and people expected that to go forward. People were questioning Legion's roster move, taking Standy off and bringing in a rookie in Geo, switching up the roles too. There's a lot of uncertainty on that side. LAG, there was not, right? They were running back the same team. They had a better placement. I get why people liked LA Gorillas, but yeah, if you looked at the underlying numbers, like Vegas were the better hardpoint team, and what do you know? They won both hardpoints last week. Not a huge surprise to me. I do think now the market has swung too far again, and I think maybe the market is just worried that the new meta in these Major 2 qualifiers, they need to act quickly on because the game is a lot different. But I tend to think that the meta has changed a lot, but not that much. Control still plays the same. Search and Destroy is the same, but there's one new map in. Hardpoint is quite a bit different, so I get why the market might flip on map 1 spreads and stuff pretty quickly. But yeah, to me, Miami are still the better team. I get that they didn't have a great week last week, but you put any team against FaZe in Toronto and ask them to win even 2 maps, and like, good luck with that. So the fact that Miami, you're right, they scratched and got 1 off of FaZe in map 1, that was good. They kept a couple other maps close. To me, they didn't change a lot. I get why they're trending down though, right? Like a top 12 finish at Major 1 doesn't look great, and then back-to-back losses to Open Major 2 doesn't look great, but I do think this is a good buy low opportunity for Miami. Specifically, map 3 I think is pretty good. Vegas have not looked great. They've been better in Control, but still I think there's an edge to be had there, or if you just want to take Miami to win straight up, or even to cover the minus 1.5. That's not crazy, but I think Miami get this done probably 3-2 or so. That's where I lean, but yeah, excited to see this Vegas team if they can continue what they showed last week.
Yeah, agreed. And then Vegas gets to play again. coincidence. Again, weird. I don't know what they do with the schedule. It's very weird. But anyways, Ultra massive favorites. -2.5, -120, -50.5 point spread in the hard point. 2.5 round favorites in the search, and then 1.5 round favorites in the control. But that sheet to -163. Wow, those are numbers. It's actually interesting too. My model again likes Vegas to cover the 2.5, mostly because it really likes Vegas and hardpoint, which is again I think the model liked. I think there's a couple of things here. The model is freaking out because Minnesota beat Ultra in that hardpoint in map 4, and then Vegas also beat. Yeah, Vegas beat LAG in the control, right? They lost
Yeah.
in the search, I think. Yeah, they lost. Yeah, they won one. They went 1-3-4. I think the model is freaking out a little bit because Toronto lost the hard point to Minnesota, and then I think the model is liking the fact that Vegas went 2-0 in the hard points against LAG. So I think that's where the discrepancy is there. I think what now I don't think Vegas should be favored in the hard point, which is what I have it at, but 50 is a big number, right? And again, we've talked about the importance of that 50 number, right? That 50 number basically says if you're in a late game and they've got 180 and you're at like 230, you just say, fine, take the points. We don't care. That's an important number to have, right? That's the difference between that's like the 8.5 point, a 7.5, 8.5 point spread in football, right? That's the win by a touchdown. And then okay, we're up in the fourth quarter, we're up by a touchdown. We don't care, we'll punt it, make them go the length of the field, score a touchdown. Go ahead, have fun. But that's okay, we're trying to run out the clock, we failed to run out the clock. Oh, there's a minute left. Just kick it deep and then give it to them, right? That's the equivalent of that. And I think there's probably some value on Vegas. Now, that's what I thought before. Now running your analysis does scare me a little bit there because it seems that teams that have those double games, they do not seem to be doing too well. I think it might be better to leave it alone and maybe not touch it as much. But I think there might be some value. I'd see what Vegas does and then maybe either double back down on Toronto or not. I don't know. I am going to very heavily bias this decision based off of your analysis and what they do there on Friday. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, so we just talked Legion in the last match. Toronto obviously had the scare versus Rocker last weekend, but still got it done. All things considered, I don't really like anything in this. If you had to make me pick, I'll take Toronto to win in a sweep just because my numbers point that direction. And Vegas have that back-to-back thing going on. A lot of things pointing in Toronto's favor. The one thing with Toronto that is interesting is their hard point. They finally lost a hard point. And it's on the map that just got introduced into the map set. So they played Rio twice last week. They opened the weekend against Heretics on Rio. They won by 66, so a very comfortable win. And then in that Minnesota series, that was game 4, and Minnesota won by 44. So mixed results there. I'd say Minnesota and Miami are about equals when it comes to hardpoint. Maybe you give the slight edge to Minnesota just with how they're playing lately. But yeah, maybe for Toronto, that is a chink in the armor, right? Rio hardpoint. It was funny, though, because when we did the analysis last week, Miami on the current map set was 15-0, but obviously Rio was an unknown. So if that map is iffy for them, maybe that's an auto veto. Now, obviously they were willing to play it twice, so I think that's not the case. I kind of think they're just going to be good on that map, and Minnesota just happened to get the win on there. And good for Minnesota for be willing to play them on that, and for Miami. Yeah, new map, let's try the Hardpoint Kings on the new map and see how we do. Worked for one, didn't work for another. All that being said, I think Toronto come out and get this done. I think Vegas, again, their numbers are gassed up just a little bit based on the series they had last weekend. I think this weekend, they'll maybe come back down to earth. I could see them dropping both matches, to be honest. But, yeah, this one will be a very tough one for them, to say the least.
Yeah, I think it will be tough, and I think the model is taking a bite out of Toronto there because of the underperformance there against Minnesota in map, and you could even see it, right? Map 3, map 1, which is hardpoint, which is map 4, right? So that's why it's saying map 1 lower than market, map 3 lower than market, and then map 2, that was the 6-0, right? And look, we're at like 99 something, right? So I think there is I think the model does maybe overreact a little bit, but that's okay. It's by design to do that, right? I like it being that way because it catches teams that are rapidly improving, and I do that feature. But sometimes it overreacts a little bit, and that's why we tell it, like, okay, bring it in a little bit. Match 2, LAG versus Optic. Again, this is another Optic large favorite, more favorite than the last game. Minus 600 the money line, minus 2.5, minus 162, minus 37.5 spread in the hard point, 1.5 spread in the search, and then 1.5 spread in the control. I LAG to cover the 2.5 here, but and I weirdly have this competitive, and I'm not sure why. The model's done some weird things where I think it thinks Minnesota is bad, but LAG is good, even though LAG lost to Vegas, but Minnesota lost to a better team. It's weird. I don't know exactly what the model is doing. But yeah, my model seems to like LAG still. I'm not sure exactly why. Um, it does weird things sometimes. But you don't particularly like Optic anywhere here, really. You have it on market, basically.
Yeah, this one is another pass for me. I just think if you're like me and you like Optic's outlook moving forward, I would just much prefer them at the shorter prices against Minnesota than at these much steeper prices against LAG, just because I think Minnesota and LAG are maybe closer than people think in terms of, how good they are. So, yeah, for me, if I'm looking at Optic, I'm looking at that Friday series. Another thing to consider, right, is LA Gorillas. This is their first match of the week. Optic play the day prior. So if you're looking for that time to prepare, that sides with LAG in this series. So yeah, I can argue it any way you want, but for me, that means pass.
Yeah, agreed. Match 3, Miami versus Thieves. Miami 150 on the money line. Minus 1.5 plus 162. 10.5 favorite in the hard point. 1.5 round favorites in the search. And then 1.5 round underdogs, but heavily shaded. So going to 5 there. My model likes Thieves. It's weird. Yeah, but it likes Thieves in everything. It even likes Thieves a little bit in the hard point, not a lot. But it likes it map 2. It thinks Miami is not great at search. And then it also likes them in map 3 too. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd, and you like them in map 3, but you don't particularly, you really are low on Thieves. You're really quite low on Thieves, and then really high on Miami here. This one will be interesting to see what happens earlier in the week on, I believe it's Friday, when Miami plays Vegas. I feel like I highlight those spots all the time when it's see what happens in that game and then bet this game depending on what happens in that game. I think this is like screaming that for here.
Yeah, I like Miami. The one thing going against them is the time to prepare thing we talked about earlier. This will be Thieves' first match of the weekend. Miami will play Friday. The thing with Thieves, though, and the extra time to prepare is that they have a very different roster. Two players that weren't on the team at Major 1 are now on the team. They did not look great against Optic, to say the least. They lost by 128 in hardpoint, round 9 search, and then they did force a round 5 in control, but that was on Invasion, which often goes to round 5. Yeah, Thieves, not a great first weekend with the new team. It's a tough matchup versus Optic, so it's hard to take a lot from that. But just the fact that they got blown out in hardpoint, and it was Rio. It's the new map that, in theory, I think should be close between teams. They got just utterly destroyed on. Until Thieves show me something in hardpoint, it's hard to make them more than a 15% win probability in map 1. And that drags down their numbers so much. Map 2, I think they can compete with Optic on. I think Optic search has been... I'm sorry, with Miami. I should stop talking about Optic. I do think Thieves can compete in search against Miami. Miami dropped 2 last week. Although they were close, around 10 to Ultra and around 11 to FaZe. A couple rounds away from getting one of those as a W. But yeah, and then Control, I don't know if I trust that Thieves number really. Like, with this new team, it's hard to take much from what they did. They went to round 5 and lost. They could have won. That was a little closer than I think people realized that round 5, Thieves had offense and had a shot. And in round 4, they needed like 3 ticks on or what were they? No, they were on offense again round 4, and they needed like 1 zone to be captured, and they got 1 tick. Yeah, tough scenes for Thieves, but all things being said, yeah, I do expect Miami to win hardpoint. They got a win against FaZe last week. Thieves still have 1 win in hardpoint on the season, and didn't show me much last week. So yeah, I really like Miami map 1. Map 2 and map 3, not so much. So I think I'll just stick with Heretics to win map 1.
Sounds good. Sunday, map 1, Seattle versus Carolina. Carolina minus 138 on the money line, minus 1.5 plus 137. Minus 15.5 point favorites in the hard point. Actually, 1.5 point round underdogs in the search. And then 1.5 round favorites in the control, but obviously shaded to the round 5 there. I like Seattle, which is weird. I think it's because they got my model sees them getting 3-0'd by New York, and I think it thinks those games were more competitive than the Carolina Ravens games, which it's funny because if you depends on which ones you pick, but if you pick like the after map 2, basically, okay, Carolina took it to a map 3 against subliners. But after that, basically every other map was basically just as competitive. They were just as competitive. The map 3 and then the map 4 and the control, second hardpoint, and then search. Those ones were actually less competitive for the Raven side than Seattle maps were. I think the model is seeing that, and okay, it's not completely disregarding the first hardpoint, but it's saying that okay, the second hardpoint was maybe potentially more representative. So it likes Seattle here. It doesn't really like the Ravens at all. We both seem to like Seattle plus 1.5, but that's not a particular. You don't really want to put a ton on a minus 188. I like Seattle map 1. We both like Seattle map 2, but we do not like Seattle map 3. There's some consensus there on Seattle. We think the Seattle's better as a search and destroy team than Carolina. So I think that's a playable angle for sure. And we both Seattle to win. We actually both that. Are you just playing those? Do you see any other plays in this for this game as well, or not?
It's a little tricky. I think my numbers on Seattle are a little too high. I don't know. I get what you're saying with the series last week, right? Both of these teams played New York. Carolina took them to a map 5. Seattle got swept. But you look at the map specifically, and there's a little bit of evidence to show that Seattle were just as competitive, right? Carolina map 1, they won by 5 points. That was really close. Search and destroy rounds, Carolina 7, New York 7, so even. But I don't know, they both played control high rise. New York won in round 5 against Carolina. They won in round 3 against Seattle. I don't know, and Carolina in their series versus Boston also won the search and destroy in that as well. Ravens search seems to be trending up, and I think my numbers are slow to react to that. I think my numbers are still like looking at the first 4 weeks or 5 weeks of Ravens search, and it's really ugly. So it's hard to bring them up to speed. And on the flip side, Seattle's search was really good in Major 1, but now they have a new roster with Brezzy in for Illy. Does that affect their search and destroy? Yeah, it very well might. They might be a worse search team at the end, but maybe they make small improvements in hardpoint or control or whatever. We still need more data on Surge for sure. So this one more or less is a stay away for me, but yeah, interesting. This will be a good match just to watch and get the data points on because, right, Ravens had a decent week despite not winning anything last weekend, and Surge came out of the gates really slow with the new roster. So, interested to see where these teams are after this match. So stay away, but yeah, if you're going to make me pick, I'll take Surge ever so slightly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Match 2 on Sunday, Rocker versus Breach. Rocker is the favorite here, minus 175 on the money line, minus 1.5 map round, 10.5 point favorites map 1, 1.5 round favorite map 2, and then 1.5 underdogs map 3, but that one's heavily shaded to go to a map 5. I like Boston a lot on the money line, and in maps 1 and 2, but less so in map 3. You're a bit ambivalent. You're a little higher on Rocker than the market. Just a little low, about right on Boston, but we both do Boston map 3. What do you just see Boston map 3 as playable? Do you kind of the like Boston plus 1.5 isn't great value. It's weird. I like Boston to win, but wait, that's weird. How can I have Boston money line at? There's not. I gotta have a bug there. I probably like Boston plus 1.5 there. Yeah, I can't. Okay. No, something's weird. Okay, I'll look at that. I think I've entered in a number wrong there. There's no way. But my model does like Boston to win. I have. There's no way. Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Or I might have not caught that. But yeah, your Boston plus 1.5 in theory should be higher than your money line
Yes.
bar.
And the thing is, the
Yeah.
money line roughly lines up with my map lines. There's got to be something wrong with the Minnesota. It must be when I entered in the Minnesota. It's okay. It's all no, but yeah, my model probably very heavily likes Boston plus 1.5. What do you see as playable here? Do you see Boston money line as playable or not, or maybe just depending on the games?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Boston looked good with ASIM in the lineup for their one series last week. They dropped the search against a team that doesn't win a lot of those in Carolina, but we just mentioned before that Carolina looked okay in search versus New York as well. So you're right, it's hard to weigh all these things. I will say, yeah, Boston map 3 has been a value for weeks. It just seems like the books are a little under where they should be on Boston to win map 3. So yeah, if anything, I'll go there. But yeah, a really interesting game to see if these teams continue what they've been doing. Boston perhaps had their best series. I guess they did beat Toronto in December, so that is probably Boston's best series of the year. But last week was really promising with the new lineup to win 3-1 like that. And Minnesota, they gave Toronto as much as they could handle. So both of these teams, Toronto Ultra Killers, if you will. So interested to see how things go when they square up here. But yeah, I favor Rocker ever so slightly just because I have more faith in Hardpoint and in Search. But yeah, ASIM on this lineup could be a huge X factor and could keep Boston in the hunt. Yeah, I'll take Boston map 3, but other than that, not a ton I love.
Yeah, agreed. Last match of the weekend. FaZe versus Subliners, which I suspect is the best match of the weekend. Although the matches are more competitive, this is the only top 4 versus match. FaZe minus 275 on the money line, minus 1.5, minus 120. FaZe 17.5 point favorites map 1, 1.5 round favorites map 2, and then 1.5 round favorites map 3. And this is very weird because my model hates FaZe. It's really weird. It hates them in search, which is weird. It shouldn't hate them that much in search. But it does not like them in hardpoint, and it also does not like them in control. Something happened with my model. It just spiked on subliners. I'm not sure what it was, but my model is really a fan of the subliners right now. Yeah, you're mostly based. You don't have a lot of value here on really anything. You're not particularly on. You're on FaZe money line a little bit. It's not really much of a bet at minus 275 there. You maybe like a little bit of minus 1.5 from your modeling. What are you betting on this map?
I think there's enough value on FaZe to take that. I know minus 275 doesn't sound good, but like when you look at the individual maps, I would rather just take the money line than try to figure out, will they win map 2? Will they win map 3? I think yes and yes. So the minus 275 makes sense then. But yeah, I think I'm really surprised by your search numbers. Both of these teams are winning searches at a really high rate. FaZe did go to a round 11 last week versus Miami, which doesn't look great. They still won it, but the fact that they couldn't get it done quicker is a little concerning. But yeah, New York split against Carolina in search and then they split searches versus Carolina and then beat Surge pretty easily. Yeah, I'd say New York is trending up higher right now than FaZe, but I still think FaZe should be the prohibitive favorites just based on they haven't had a bad weekend yet. The only team to have beaten FaZe so far is Toronto twice at Major 1. Yeah, New York are not Toronto, so I'll take FaZe. But yeah, expect a competitive series for sure. These two teams just throw haymakers, it seems, every time they match up. Should be a good one.
Yeah, agreed. I'm interested in this one as well. Beating the market in combined model plays. Yeah, so again, last week both of our number 3 picks hit, and we both seem like Boston for number 3. I've got Optic minus 1.5 versus Minnesota. You also have that play as well. Heretics map 1 versus Thieves, and then I've got Subliners -1.5 versus Boston, and then we both some form of Boston versus Minnesota there. Again, but it's funny. Our number 3 pick is +3 units, but our number 1 pick is -8, and our number 2 pick is -1.5. So I think it's funny that the pick we say we're more sure of, that one is the one losing. But like the number 3 pick, we're like, oh, I'll throw a little bit on this, which actually tends to be a little bit more higher value. Like I have a +125 down there. I like how that's the one that keeps hitting. So I think that's funny. Here's a combined model plays this week. Not a lot, as you saw from our episode today. Texas money line -1.5. Toronto map 2, Thieves map 3, Seattle map 1, moneyline map 2, and then Boston map 3. That's all our combined model really seems to like there for this week. Next week we will be back for week 3 preview, and yeah, we'll be back on recording Wednesday, posting on Thursday, and yeah, we are almost halfway through Major 2 qualifiers, and then halfway through the season. But yeah, anything else? Any other bets you want to make, or?
Just one thing to note, we can add Boston +1.5 in their second match to that combined plays because we had that funky issue. But
You're
yeah,
right.
otherwise this
Boston
week,
-1.5. Yeah.
yeah, otherwise this week, a lot of the lack of plays is due to my numbers just matching market a lot in quite a few series. Yeah, less for us to cheer for, but maybe a better ROI in the end. We'll
Hopefully.
see. Should be a fun weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it for this week, everybody. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Good luck, everybody, this weekend. See ya.